Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the preview session for the winter term at Berkeley Ollie. My name is Mick Chantler, and I will be returning to Berkeley Ollie to teach a brand new course, one that I've been working on for close to a year now, called Vietnam Before LBJ. I think all of us are pretty familiar with the tragedy in Vietnam, and we probably don't need to be reminded about the details of the war itself. So I want to emphasize that this class will not be a history of the Vietnam War per se. Rather, what I hope to do in the 6 weeks that we're going to spend together is delve into the decision-making process of Lyndon Johnson's predecessors, the presidents depicted on your screen that made key decisions regarding first what was called Indochina and then eventually came to be called Vietnam, to see how they arrived at the conclusions they did as to the proper course of action in Vietnam. And my central guiding theme that will link together the lectures is that while Johnson clearly bears the lion's share of the responsibility for the Vietnam debacle, we can't lay the catastrophe strictly at his feet and blame him because his predecessors set the table, you might say, for his decision taken in the spring of 1965, which resulted in the Vietnam War. So we're going to do a deep dive into the background of the war, beginning with the figure on the lower left-hand corner of your screen, and that's Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was, we don't think of this normally, but Roosevelt was very, very interested in Vietnam. He was not a Francophile, and of course, Indochina was under the thumb of the French Empire at the time that he was still alive. But Roosevelt was determined to change that and to liberate Vietnam as well as all the other world colonies from their European overlords and change the way the world did business with the third world countries that were the subjects of European colonialism. So FDR kind of emerges as the brightest light in our story. Unfortunately, he dies in April of 1945. Is going to be replaced by Harry Truman, who we see in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And Truman, for a lot of different reasons, is going to take a different tack on Vietnam, as will Eisenhower, depicted in the top center of your screen, shown discussing the war with Lyndon Johnson not long before Eisenhower's death. And then in the very center of your screen, and I put it there for a reason, we see John F. Kennedy discussing Vietnam with a very famous American of the period, and that's Douglas MacArthur, who warned Kennedy, do not fight a land war in Asia. Would that President Kennedy and his successor, Lyndon Johnson, had listened to MacArthur's advice. And then, of course, on the screen, we're also going to be talking a great deal in our course about Ho Chi Minh in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, holding the young child to his cheek. And on the upper right-hand corner, the president, dictator, really, of South Vietnam, Diem, New Den Diem, and he's going to be a center figure in our story. Some of the themes that we'll be covering in our time together will be how domestic politics related to the presidential decision-making process of these four presidents, the Red Scare of the 1940s and 50s, influenced all these figures to a very significant degree and made it difficult for them to turn their back on the crisis in Vietnam, which is what probably we all, in retrospect, would recommend, but they were prisoners of their time, as we all are. In the week 2, we're going to be looking at how FDR and Truman regarded the French presence in Indochina at a time when most Americans could not have located Indochina on a map. But these two men, Truman and FDR were intensely interested in Vietnam, and we'll explain how they made their decisions. Week three, we're going to look at Eisenhower and how he approached the very delicate subject of what do we do about this mess in Southeast Asia. Ike's Great Dilemma will be the title of that lecture, and we're going to see that he was torn between a rock and a hard place, as he saw it. He did not want to abandon South Vietnam, knowing that the communist takeover would be disastrous, both on the international geopolitical scene as well as for domestic politics. And yet he couldn't see that it was going to succeed if we maintained our presence there. Center to our story is going to be JFK's decision to up the ante in Vietnam and increase our commitment, much to, I think, the dismay of many Kennedy admirers. We have to look back at his 1,000-day period and see that it was uh, largely JFK's decision to cement our position even more deeply there. Yes, he talked about getting out, but his actions were not getting us out. They were getting us in deeper and deeper into the quagmire. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how Johnson morphed from being the peace candidate, a man who wanted to build the great society at home and prevent nuclear war abroad, as you might remember that little girl on the left of your screen being a key figure in a LBJ advertisement in the 1964 presidential campaign, in which he hoped to convince Americans that he was the peacenik and Barry Goldwater was the warmonger. Well, didn't quite turn out the way we'd all hoped. So that's our lineup for the winter term. I think even if you feel that you know pretty much everything you need to know about Vietnam, I think you'll find something of value in this class because, as I say, it's not so much about the Vietnam War per se, it's how do presidents arrive at a decision. And we're going to see the various tug and pulling factors that brought us deeper and deeper into the depths of the jungles of Vietnam. Thank you, everyone. I hope to see many of you in the winter term. Appreciate it.